All right. So I've been getting some questions lately from folks about it seems like Amazon Canada changed their inventory limits, um, and you can't send in as much product as you used to be able to, especially on new SKUs. So how's that going to affect things? So I'm going to give you my thoughts in this video on the inventory limits on Amazon in Canada. So one of the things I was finding that a lot of folks were starting to tell me about, and because I never saw any documentation, I looked for it. And if you know of any particular documentation on this, feel free to drop it in the comments down below. But one of the things I was finding was people kept saying Amazon's changed it from 200 units to 75 units in Canada. And so sometimes that can be scary when there's changes like that. So just to put things in perspective, you're probably familiar that Amazon in the US before the fourth quarter, all of a sudden they said you can't send in more than 200 units of a new SKU. Or if you had a SKU that maybe even was an established SKU, but it just didn't have a lot of sales history behind it, they were lowering the amount you could send into 200. So I ran into issues with that on some fairly popular products around the holiday season that didn't do a lot of business outside of the holiday season because they were very giftable products. And so I couldn't send in more than 200 units. And then I also have a service where I help people expand into international marketplaces. And they were finding they couldn't send in more than 200 units to not just the United States, but the UK and Canada. And recently, Canada seems to have changed this to 75 units. And so some people have concerns about that, and I understand why. So just put this in perspective. Oftentimes, when you're selling in Canada, your sales might be, let's say, 10, 20% of your US sales, which is a great way to grow your sales when you compare, some of the other ways that you could grow. Really good situations, whether it's they're just really good at selling in Canada or there's just a lot of competition in the US that's not necessarily there in Canada, or whatever the case is. Some folks will say, you know what, it's maybe 25%. The best I've ever seen is someone who said over the course of an entire year, his Canadian sales were almost 35%. It was like 34.77, I think he said. So it was like just shy of 35%. So basically a little bit better than a third of his US sales he was getting in Canada. Well, let's use that math and that ratio for what the difference is. So if you're able to send in on a new product 200 units into the US, but in Canada you can only send in 75, that's actually 37.5%. So think of it this way. If your sales are going to be 20%, so if you're looking at 20% of your sales that you get in the US, you'll probably see in Canada. Well, if you're able to send in 37.5%, that's almost double proportionally what you could do. So it may sound like one of those things like, well, but I want to be able to send in more. Well, there's things you can do. So you can always start with a small batch and see how it goes. See if they increase your inventory limits as time goes on. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't have a lot of data on that one to say, how favorable are they to that in Canada? Because it seems to be a very new rule as I record this. But there's also third-party fulfillment centers and warehouses. And if you have a suggestion of one that you love, feel free to leave it as a comment down below. Um, and it's just one of those things. Like there's always options. So you can just import more often, or you can find someplace else to store it outside of Amazon. As well. So there's always options. I wouldn't worry too much about it, especially when you compare it to the U.S. and the 200 unit rule for either products that don't have huge sales or ones that are a little bit new. So if in Canada it's 75, when you look at where most folks, even like I said, best I've ever heard of was about a 35% of his US sales he was seeing in Canada. So if he was able to start with 37.5% of his available inventory, that actually still works out in his favor. So hopefully that makes sense. So if you found this perspective to be helpful, please consider liking this video as well as subscribing to this channel. If you are not yet selling on Amazon in Canada, what I would highly recommend is checking out this video right here, where I walk through more of the steps of how you can get started, as well as head to canadachecklist.com and you can download a free checklist where I walk you through step by step how you can grow your own international empire starting in Canada. So I wish you the best in your e-commerce journey. Take care.